not a lost generation, but the architects of the future. Please give a big hand to Colin Whitfield.
Pretty awesome introduction. I hope I didn't win that just because of the girls' votes, and I hope that my ideas are worthy, but I just want us to get a little bit into the atmosphere of the theme of the festival, which is awake. So let's do a little exercise. Can you all just stand up a second? Stand up, please. Now, I only have one rule in life. Wherever I go, I act as if everyone is my friend until proven otherwise. So, for the next 30 minutes, I want you all to pretend, if you have to pretend, that definitely you're my friend, but you're also friends with everyone here. And I want you to turn to the person next to you. Go ahead, turn to the person next to you. Oh, really? And give them a high five and say, "You're awesome!"
You're awesome, man.
Awesome. Nice. Okay. So, we've raised the energy a little bit. You can sit down or you can stand up, you can shout, you can clap, whatever you guys want. Alright? So, clap. Now, isn't this a beautiful, beautiful stage? Isn't it a beautiful castle out in nature? All this inspiration around us. It's the perfect setting for selfies. Now, who in the last 24 hours or 2 days commented, posted, liked, or shared something on Facebook? Raise your hands. Don't be shy because I'm going to check your Facebook profiles. Go ahead.
Not necessarily selfies.
And what?
Not necessarily selfies. Anything.
Anything on social media. Who here is in their 20s? Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Who here's in their 30s?
Woo!
Oh, nice. I like the woo. Up until 39? Anyone up until 39? No? Anyone under or over that age group? From now in this presentation, you're all honorary millennials because I'd like to give you a perspective of what our generation's going through. So we've been called the lost generation, the unhappy generation. I don't know if you guys saw this famous documentary or speech, on the internet by Simon Sinek talking about millennials. You guys seen it? Yeah. All right, just to recap. Thank you, Roxana. Simon says that because of technology and social media, we've created a culture of instant gratification, a kind of addiction basically to technology. And we have the technology to connect with people halfway around the world, but we've almost disconnected each other from the people most closest to us. They say that we were raised with a failed parenting strategy and we were given this false sense of entitlement, which makes it very difficult for us to fit into corporate cultures and everyday life. And all these factors have led to a rising number of depression in our age groups. And I want you to look around again to your newfound friends. Look around, have a look at the guy next to you. Now, I won't ask you to raise your hand for this, but 1 in 5 of us is currently suffering or will suffer from anxiety and depression in our lifetime. It's a sad thought, I know. Aren't you glad you came to this positive presentation? But what I want to share with you actually is a positive message. What I want to share with you is perhaps a different view of what depression and anxiety means in our era. I want to share with you my story on my journey to my own awakening. And I want to share with you the tools that I learned and picked up that maybe if it inspires you to use them and it helps you on the process of your awakening, good. But I think that we have a big role to play, our generation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Nodding in excitement. Good, good. Now, I myself fell into a massive depression. As an advertising agency owner over 3 years ago, I had a team of 30 people, won multiple awards, worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, but I couldn't have been more miserable. I brushed this aside thinking that this is the price to pay for success, that if I'm gonna make it and I'm gonna become rich, then all my problems are gonna be solved. Until one day, one of my anchor clients left and I had to get rid of a third of my team, who were like family to me. The next day, or that night actually, I lied in bed and I had this sudden pain rise up in my chest. I started to shake and sweat, and my ex-wife at the time almost called an ambulance. The next day, the doctors diagnosed me with hypertension and a small tear in one of my arteries. Looking back, I think it was the perfect metaphor for what I was feeling at the time because I was heartbroken. You see, I'd done everything society told me that would make me happy and successful, and it just didn't. So I remember reading at the time a quote which said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results." And so, determined to beat my depression, I threw away and brushed aside everything I had learned from the personal development gurus who seem to sing to the tune of work 16-hour days and you'll get what you want. And at that time, I was introduced to a meditation class by a good friend of mine, Richard. Now, Richard is a successful businessman, and I don't think I would have listened to him or anything around that because, I thought that meditation and mindfulness at the time was hairy-fairy woo-woo stuff. Now, Richard taught us this concept that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And as I thought about those words, I thought about what was my depression trying to show me? What was all that anxiety, isolation, pain trying to teach me? And one idea that really helped me overcome my depression is that depression isn't something bad that happens to us. It's what happens when we become desensitized to our internal guidance system, our intuition, which tells us that what we're doing in life is not aligned with our values and beliefs. It's what screams at us when we need to make a change in our life so we can find more happiness, purpose, and rediscover our real selves. Now, I was determined to get more in touch with my intuition. I learned a valuable lesson at the time. But I realized that I had to change my entire environment around me because I was stuck in that rat race that we're all stuck in sometimes. Jobs. I made my own prison. I made my own, basically, job. And I remember this picture that I saw at the time, which was a classroom full of students. And they all had these little bubble dreams. And everyone had different bubbles. One had triangular dreams, one had polygonic, one had circular. And the teacher was going around and cutting them all into perfect little squares. And I kind of realized that I had spent the better half of my life learning all these things that I would never actually use, and following all these shiny objects society told me that I would find success and happiness with. So, I asked my intuition, what should I do next? And at that point, I discovered something called creative visualization. Has everyone heard of this? Creative visualization? Roxana? Two? Good. Something new that you learned today, hopefully. Now, creative visualization is based on the idea that your outer world is determined by your inner world, your predominant thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. And that if you wanted to change your life and make it better, all you had to do was dream up a better life. And I remember studying all the people who claim creative visualization worked for them, like Oprah Winfrey, Will Smith, Conor McGregor, and at that point, who? Say again? Picasso. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I remember studying the great Jim Carrey. Now, Jim Carrey, before he was ever famous, used to go with his convertible car every day up to the Hollywood sign, and he would imagine what his life would be like working with some of the best artists in his time. He would imagine what it would feel like to be the best comedian of his time. And one day he wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered. And he wrote the date, Thanksgiving 1995. Now on that date, right after his breakthrough success from Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, he was cast in Dumb and Dumber, and guess what his sum of money that he was paid? It was $10 million. I said, nah, get the hell out of here. Too good to be true. But I was desperate to try anything. Now, creative visualization implies that we are all part of one singular energy. And we are just the manifestation of some supreme higher intelligence that keeps us safe. And all we have to do is ask and believe in that intelligence, and we could manifest what we wanted in our lifetime. And I began to examine my inner models and my inner beliefs, and I realized that although I believed that the world was possible to shape, ultimately I thought it was a difficult process filled with competition. Now, I didn't believe in God, and I didn't believe in luck. And so I thought maybe that life was ultimately meaningless and that we had the opportunity to create our own meaning. But, you know, I started thinking that maybe that's the source of also my depression, because what's the most important need after survival for human beings? It's meaning, isn't it? I mean, what's the point to it all? And I remember thinking that, you know, I'd rather live a delusional life, but a happy one, rather than a conservatively right one, but a miserable one. So I started to dream of a better life for myself. I started to imagine a life where I had more engaging relationships, more empowering ones, and I got that. I imagined a life where I would have more income, and suddenly clients started writing me checks for the next quarter saying, keep the money. I'm like, what? That never actually happens. I imagine riding a nice car, and I got this BMW for free that I got to ride for 6 months. It was pretty cool. And at that point I imagined, what if I could set up my business in such a way that I didn't have to be a slave in it, that it could provide me an automated source of income so that I could be free to discover myself, my original goal. And that's when I discovered the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Anyone read The 4-Hour Workweek? You should read it, check it out. Smart girl. So basically, Tim Ferriss says that we're addicted to this idea of staying busy, and that sometimes we organize our lives around these ideals that keep us in this rat race, and actually you can achieve a lot more by doing a lot less. So excited by this idea, I overhauled all my agency processes, and I ended up going from 16-hour work days to 4-hour work weeks, and something amazing happened. My income tripled. I went on a holiday for a whole year and my income actually increased, and I was happy. Now that got me thinking, I mean, if I could use creative visualization in this way, what are the predominant thoughts and belief patterns of our society that generates this phenomenon of depression and anxiety rising in our culture? And at the time, as I always did, I looked to my own experience and I realized that in the advertising industry, we produce 90% of, well, not just the advertising industry, but 90% of all information in general is commercial and entertainment in nature. So I was partaking in an industry that was generating all these ideas that could have been contributing to this phenomenon. At that point, I came up with this theory which I call the commoditization of creativity. You see, I believe that creativity is one of the highest of human capacities and virtues, but we gladly trade it much in the same way a factory worker does, on a wage per hour basis. I believe that not just creatives and not just millennials, but all people are born with a strong desire to make a difference in the world, but because of what we heard by our parents or by our teachers, that the life of an artist is riddled with poverty and difficulty, we end up settling. We settle for jobs we don't like. We settle for promoting meaningless violence and sex and shaming women's bodies. We settle for trying to sell sausages to mothers, trying to convince them that it's good for their kids. Guilty. Do you remember a time when artists used to use their voice to speak out against the evils of the world? Do you remember when Michael Jackson sung about "Let's heal the world"? Do you remember when David Bowie and Queen sung about giving love one more chance? Do you remember when in the Vietnam War we sang songs of protest? What do we sing about today? Who's singing about Libya, Palestine, and Syria? What are we singing about? Work, 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 work. Work, 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 work. Now, you gotta ask yourselves, I mean, what is it that our leaders want us to promote? And why do they promote this insatiable appetite for consumerism? As if we're trying to constantly fill this gaping hole in our lives, but never fully satisfying our thirst. You gotta ask yourself, maybe why is this done? Why do they want to keep our minds filled with anxiety and fear? So that maybe it's so that we don't listen to our hearts, maybe so that we don't listen to our intuition, maybe so that we don't, or that we just ignore what we know is right and wrong. It's no wonder that there's so many depressed people out in the world, because that's literally our intuition screaming that this isn't right. And I'm here to tell you to trust your intuition, because it is right. Now, how do we go forward with this? What can we do with this? I remember seeing this other painting, And in this painting was this Monopoly table with a world map and 4 or 5 world leaders sitting around the table. And that table was resting on a mass of people, lots and lots of people. And the caption wrote, "All we have to do is stand up." But you guys know that. I don't think I'm saying anything that new. So how do we actually wake up? How do we actually stand up? Now, going back to my story, I had found happiness, but I guess with all that free time, boredom and anxiety started to kick in again. And I found my old friend depression knocking on my door. But this time I had faith, and I knew what I had to do. I had to ask my intuition, what was it that life was showing me that I needed to make a change with? And I remember reading a quote at the time on how we end up becoming what we repress. And usually what we repress is some childhood trauma, and that we either become that or we act in the exact opposite, but both are not free choices. And I thought about my own life, and I thought about, I had found happiness, but only in so much as I was withdrawn from the world, as if I wasn't participating in it. And I thought about my family, and I thought about my father, actually, because my father was a tough businessman. He raised us, and he did everything for his family. An incredible person. But he was raised in a tough English little town where people used to say things like, "It's a jungle out there. There's no such thing as luck. Life is hard." And I thought, maybe that's the source of my trauma. Maybe that's why I couldn't fully trust life and let go, and that depression kept visiting me again. And to kind of exemplify how I felt at the time, I wrote in my journal, "I'm so happy and grateful that I get to experience firsthand the pain and suffering that the whole world is going through because of how they place their worth in their monetary and bank accounts, but how they fail to see that they're worthy and valuable all along. I'm so happy and grateful that I get to see and experience the manipulation that takes place in the form of doing the right choice or doing the tough choice, but how they only do it because they feel they have no control." But I was still perplexed. I was still confused. And I asked my intuition again, and as if by coincidence again, I remember reading a quote by Albert Einstein which said, "You can't solve problems from the same level of thinking that created them." And I remember stumbling across this experiment that was done to mimic the brainwave patterns of Buddhist monks that had been meditating for 15 years. So who wants to know the secret of how you can generate that same mind frame that Buddhist monks have for meditating over 15 years? You want to know what the secret is? It's utter and radical forgiveness. And the results are spectacular. People who practice this experience, aside from higher levels of compassion and empathy, but increased creativity. They even seem to jump higher. It's as if the emotional trauma and judgments that we carry around weigh us down in life. And I realized at that point that I had to forgive. I had to forgive my parents, myself, world leaders, and that what I'd written in my journal was only half the story. Because if you ask our parents in their generation if the pursuit of money actually made them happy, they'll most likely tell you that it didn't. But we have to recognize their sacrifice that they went through to be miserable so that we can understand that monetary pursuit is not the answer and is not the only aspect. Now, enlivened and motivated by this realization, I came back to the real world and I ended up creating this coaching program for young entrepreneurs, specifically in the creative industries. Anyone here is a freelancer? Anyone here is in tech? Anyone here is in advertising? Awesome. So we have this program that I teach people on how to create financial freedom so that you can have the time and resources to get in touch with your intuition so that you can then follow your purpose. Because I believe that more empowered millennials, more empowered creatives is going to be the answer that we need so that we can create a better future. And as I had that realization, as my mission became concrete in my mind, amazing things started to happen again. I was invited to the open mic challenge at TED and won first place. And the funny thing is, for about 2 years before that, in my goal diary, I had a logo of Ted and a picture of Tony Robbins, like this. That was my first ever public talk, actually. And after that, I imagined a bigger stage with music and the word awake. And here I am. It's no joke, actually. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Now, that leads me to my last point. What if an entire generation of millennials could use their imaginations to build a world that we believe in and that we actually want to live in? I mean, I don't have to tell this crowd that because this is what you're here for, I know that. But maybe I'm telling you this so that you can go on and inspire some other people for this. Because in my lesson in my life, I realized that the words and actions that we put out there are more powerful than we think. They literally create the world around us. And all these problems that we're facing, the threat of nuclear holocaust, rise in immigration, Islamic extremism, all this stuff, maybe it's something that we also have a small contribution in some small way. I mean, ask yourselves with radical honesty, if the divides we see in the world are some mirror of something that we have to resolve and fix in us. Is the rise in Islamic extremism a nice mirror of the rise in consumerist extremism? Is the rise in feminism and emancipated men? Oh yes, we do feel the pain, ladies. And we deserve it, because this is over 3 millennia of suppressing you guys. Or is it perhaps the feminine energy that us men suppress in us, because we were taught to be tough men for hard work? Now, as Rita King says, there couldn't be a more important time for creatives, for millennials, because we're moving away from the information era about cold logic and systems and into the imagination era, where it's about values. And I leave you guys with a question. Are you guys gonna continue to give way to depression and anxiety? Even just by participating in a little conversation like, yeah, the world sucks, politicians suck, our country sucks. Don't ever say that, by the way, especially in front of me. I love this country. It's an amazing country. You have so much potential. You don't even realize. So, to conclude, and I say this for my little nephew who's turning 1 in a couple of days, because I kind of realized that, you know, the irony about life is I'm probably never going to see this world in my lifetime. But, just like our parents before us, I think that it's my responsibility to leave a better world for the next generation. And so I say the following things to you guys. Number 1, know that your thoughts and your level of consciousness literally affects the world around you. And if you don't believe me, check out the science. It's converging. Number 2, if something makes you feel anxious, depressed, or a sense of injustice, stop first and ask, what is it in me that perhaps I need to change? What is it in me that I have to forgive or forgive others so that they can understand me in return? Because we're not going to solve violence with more violence or blame with more blame. We need a new level of thinking, and we need to create space for that level of thinking to happen. Number 3, I know that it's a difficult world, and we deserve to live in a better one as millennials. But know that it's difficult because there is no blueprint to follow. We have to create the blueprint. Number 5, I'd like to encourage you to quiet your busy minds once in a while and just let your playful hearts take over and allow your intuition to guide you, because there is a huge strength in that and amazing things can happen. It's risky, cried reason. It's impossible, cried experience. Give it a try, whispered the heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin Whitfield. Now, I would very much enjoy if you guys have but one question for Colin. What would that be? All millennials out here. No question.
Do you still have the depressing thoughts?
Yes, of course, but I just use it as a guide, you know? I just say, what do I have to do? What do I have to change? What's about my situation that I can do better with? Or forgive someone or get in closer contact with someone or hug someone. I don't know, you know? Basically, I just don't want to stigmatize it. And I think that's an important aspect because in a society that labels, you know, all these illnesses as something bad, people have a hard time getting out of it sometimes. When actually it could actually be a mechanism for us to awaken even further. You're welcome.
And related to this question, what is I'm not sure I got the goal of the presentation, and why was depression the focal point of the presentation?
Well, I don't think my presentation had much of a goal except to maybe inspire some aspects. I think that, you know, I had a decision to go with a very logical type of presentation and to present my course a lot more, but I wanted to take this platform to maybe tickle your hearts, so to speak, because I think that we're going into an era where it's going to be a bit more about, you know, what we do with this rather than what we do with this. And of course, there are great people doing a lot of good things with this out here, but I'd like to use a little bit more of this and that.
What about focusing on the other side of depression, like focusing on the positivity of this?
You didn't find it as a positive message. I didn't do my job then. Actually, it's meant to be a positive lesson. I mean, the key for me is that everything in life doesn't have to have a bad meaning. It's the meaning that you attribute to it. And anything can be a really, really positive friend if you dare to give it that meaning. The same as the bad politicians. I mean, when Donald Trump was elected, I said, I think it's a great thing because he's going to be a great mirror so that we can see what we need to change in us. He's going to be that catalyst that goes, fucking hell, we need to change something right now. Look at this guy.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The floor is still open. Should you have questions? Colin has taken a seat, so he's...
I'm done.
Thank you
No
very
more
much
questions?
for listening, guys. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Actually, I had a question, if you don't mind.
I love it.
Because I've been hearing to what you represent, what you are saying, and the way that you're living your life. And one thing in many conversations with people, with young people, mostly from Romania, is that about expats. You're an expat. You are a foreign person living in Bucharest. And my message representing those big masses of young people would be, come on, Colin. Your name is Colin. You're an exotic presence. Everybody remembers who you are after they first met you. But I'm Romanian. Things don't happen the way they do for you, for me.
That's a beautiful question.
What would you say to that?
You're really good at this, by the way. Really good intro as well. I was impressed. Yeah, I mean, when people ask me, ce naiba faci tu în România? Eu mereu zic, ce naiba faci tu în România? Adică, nu știu dacă vedem același țară, și e adevărat că eu am altă perspectivă. Și poate că am fost norocos cu asta, cine știe. Dar venind aici, eu văd numai oportunități. Adică, da, lucruri sunt grele, dar vă zic, în Grecia, știi cât de greu este? Jumătate din populație, din generația noastră, din vârsta noastră, sunt, how do you call it? Without work, unemployed in Romania? Somed, mersi. Și, nu știu, ce vă zic? Go travel. Go travel, get other ideas and come back. It's such an open world right now. In fact, you know, one thing that I'm trying to teach actually is this notion of how we can use our intuition better. And maybe you have a lot of questions around that. Please come and ask me. I know it's a crazy subject. It's kind of like programming your reality in a weird way. So coders, when I teach, by the way, programmers of these techniques, it's amazing the results they get. It's like they're built for that, actually. And what I recommend to people is that don't stay stuck in the same place with the same ideas around you. Get out there, go get other ideas, break that energy, make it move and come back and do something better. Even do it from a distance, you know? I hope that answered that. But what I'd like to say is the following, you know, I really, really believe in this country. I believe that it's going to play a really important role in our future. You probably think I'm crazy, and that's okay. Time will tell if I really am or not. But I really believe that this country has a lot to offer, and it certainly offered a lot to me. And as you can tell, I'm not just a foreigner that, you know, nici vorbesc limba. Adică am fost căsătorit cu o româncă, am avut numai colegi români. Adică am iubit țara asta și mie îmi pare rău când văd oameni care nu iubesc țara lor. Și nu e numai în România, să știți. Este în Grecia, în Anglia. În Anglia zic același lucru. Credeți că sunteți singuri? Adică dacă sunt un străin aici, vă dau o perspectivă asta. Știi? E la fel în fiecare țară. E mentalitatea aici care contează, nimic altceva. Nimic. I hope I didn't go over time.
Come on, answering that in Romanian, that earns you a big round of applause, Colin. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, man. Thank you, thank you. Inspiration from all across the world.